month, a new batch of audio dramas to look through. There has been a lot of activity this month, a lot like the last, if not more. I'd even say this was a better month for audio dramas than the last, as there's some great works here, along with a lot of fun things coming up. We'll be looking at continuations, new additions to ongoing series, and an original, one-off story. Seeing as I started last month off with its first part, I thought I'd start off this one with the second, and since I've covered the first part, I will not go over anything that hasn't changed, that being the voice acting and general production quality, unless there's something in particular I feel I should make note of. A quick note, this episode in particular is more mature than the last, so if you're younger than, say, 16, I'd say that's a safe age. This definitely isn't for you. Lots of suggestive humor at the end. With that, let's talk about part 2 of The Unexpected Love Life of Dust Shine, created by Zigbar Assassin. I hate to say it, but it feels like a downgrade from the last part. Not only is the audio balancing off, but it feels so much more lacking in the sound and, at times, voice acting department. Where there was supposed to be 6 sets of hooves, you only heard 1. When there were rapids, you heard silence. I get the narrator already described some of this, but when you sometimes hear other sounds come in after they're explained, it makes it feel so much more hollow when they don't. On top of that, the sounds would help with the immersion in this case. There were times where the sound or music was almost if not louder than the voice actors, making it hard to hear certain parts. Specifically, the Shadowbolts, Applejack, and even the narrator at times. Stephen Magnet's voice peaks frequently, which hurt my ears with how often I had to turn up the audio to hear certain characters. That and Rainbow's voice actor, Kagome, peaking during her rant to Nightmare Moon. That especially hurt. Though the voice acting is as good as it was in the last part, if not better in some areas, it felt lacking in others. This is most likely a problem with the fanfiction, but at times when they were in the library, only AJ, Rainbow, and Pinkie talked, even though we know, or should know, that Fluttershy and Rarity were there. Yet it felt like they just appeared later on, as it wasn't established audio-wise. Rarity, despite being mentioned or implied to be there, didn't begin to speak until the Stephen Magnet scene about halfway through, making it feel a bit off balance. Even though this is how it worked in the original episode where you could see them there, though some characters spoke more in comparison, and easily flowed in the fanfiction, this was split into 2 parts unlike the fanfiction, making this feel more awkward. There is also the fact that with all the changes occurring as is, the listener could potentially mistake this as a change. This may not be a problem in future listens when both parts can be listened back to back. What is the problem is scenes like the one where characters were fighting the Manticore, and you heard characters like Rainbow Dash talking, but not Rarity making a sound when she kicked it, or Applejack going yee-haw, things you can hear in the original episode that may not be able to be implied in the text. I wouldn't have minded if there were more sounds to support the chaos of the scene, or if Rainbow didn't speak in the background, but there wasn't. There were also times where the characters screamed and only a couple could be heard screaming. All these elements add together make some scenes come off hollow in comparison to others. There needs to be a decision made if there's going to be extra voices and sound to support the narration, or if the narration stands on its own for consistency. And if there's going to be additions like the screaming, it can't go halfway with only half the characters doing the screaming. If you're already making changes such as removing dialogue tags, I don't think it'd be too much of a problem to add things from the original MLP episode, or make subtle changes to make it feel less like the Dusk, Applejack, and Rainbow show. If I had to make one last note on the voice acting, the delivery sometimes felt a little slow, affecting the pacing of the episode, which felt sluggish. Part of this comes from the fic because of the writing. With this being closer to the original MLP episode, unlike the first part that diverged more dialogue-wise, the jokes that are presented too slowly or have more focus on them and not contributing much to the progression of the story stand out and make it drag. As great as the narrator was at times in this episode, you could hear the pacing coming to a crawl, with jokes in the scenes like the giggle at the ghosties one, which most likely was because it diverged too much from the original MLP episode to tell this overdrawn joke that's more of a summary of a joke from the original episode, or in the Rarity Wet Main scene. The problems mostly come from the original fiction, but if the voice acting was a bit faster in delivery, or did more with the voice actors, even sound, it'd probably have worked better. On a more positive note, the times when the changes worked great. That what Rarity main scene, when you could hear the narrator, was pretty funny before it started to drag. Even the twist on Rainbow scene with the Shadow Bolts was neat. Having Pocket-Sized Kitsune, the voice actor of Nightmare Moon, do the voice of the Shadow Bolt was a great idea. I like that there were divergences between the original MLP episode and this retelling. Unfortunately, making the scenes that didn't change too much or flopped in execution stand out more, but where they worked, they did and well. The entire Nightmare Moon scene where she tries to bed Dusk was hilarious, and the way the narrator, the rocking Double K, did a fantastic job on the delivery, as he did through the reading despite some dips in expressiveness on the odd occasion. But that Squeak Dust voice actor, Zigbar Assassin, gave us the cherry on top, not to mention Rarity calling Nightmare Moon a whore. Perfect. Then the whole element scene, the way Applejack coughed and commented on Rarity being the element of generosity, Dusk argument with Pinky integrating a fourth wall break well, and Celestia main to gorging her depression in ice cream because of what she had to do to her sister during the emotional moment added a great humorous punch that felt in line with the rest of the episode. I could go on. Every part of it was fun and better paced than the rest of the whole episode. You can tell the ending pulls out all the stops. It's the highlight of the entire episode, and well worth putting up with some of the not-so-great parts. Though I'd say the first part was more consistent, the second's end makes up for a lot of that, and will be the reason for my return in the future. The failings, though annoying at times, didn't do too much to harm the overall product. It's noticeable here and there, but there's still quality voice acting, good sound production when it appears, and a lot of well-executed humor right at the end. There's only so much you can do when it's an adaptation, writing issues you can't always smooth out, or jokes you can't really fix if you want to keep true to the original. For what they had to work with, they did a good job, and I'd recommend both parts wholeheartedly. Hearthswarming Rush is a belated holiday special by Quill Feather, and it was well worth the wait. Though it lacks sound and music, I wouldn't consider that a deterrent, since it has the feeling of a fan fiction reading, even if this is an original story. It could help to give it more character and accentuate aspects, but I don't think it needs it for what it is. This could also be a style choice. Not all fanfiction readings add bells and whistles. What's important is the audio is clear and everyone can be heard. The focus is the characters, in particular Quill, Feather, and Vinyl, who work well together. The opposites dynamic works here, as Quill's the experienced worker who wants to do a good job and just get through the holiday, while Vinyl has a more laid-back, even lazy personality. Not that she doesn't want to work or do it well, more that she's clearly out of her element, portrayed well by the fact she's swearing in an environment where it's clearly inappropriate. Speaking of, Vinyl's nature is the driving force of conflict for herself and for Quill, but mostly Quill. It's pretty obvious from the start these two would clash at some point, but showing them getting along was a good way to start, as the conflict isn't that they couldn't get along, but how Vinyl's attitude and lack of retail experience causes issues for Quill, while also causing issues for herself. It also feels more natural while giving us some fun character moments. These issues are clearly shown to be unintentional, which makes it easier to sympathize with Vinyl later while still sympathizing with Quill. You can see how Vinyl's friendly personality and her overly talking to customers can be a good thing, despite it distracting from work, since the customer would leave with a positive experience. At the same time, we can see how Quill is, in some part, at fault when it came to the carrots as, for all we know, she didn't really tell her which carrots to put the sale sticker on. All of this builds to a satisfying end, where we see why Vinyl was so passionate about this job, why she got so mad when anything seemed to threaten her job, or how nervous she got when Rich seemed even the slightest bit upset with her. She was raising money to buy Octavia, her roommate, a gift for Hearthswarming. What makes this work so well is how it's built up. Vinyl explains how her job as a DJ doesn't make a lot of money. This added to her anger about being fired all comes together when we find out why this job she clearly wasn't great with meant so much to her, leading to a heartwarming conclusion. It also makes Quill's seemingly unjustified defenses of Vinyl more touching, as it's clear she was picking up on something that wasn't immediately obvious. The voice work here was great. Quill's voice worked well with the character and expressed a jaded retail worker with accuracy. Squibbly Squire also did well as the voice of Rich and a customer. If I had to make one complaint on the voice work, it's my role actually. This is sort of a my fault situation. I had a feeling the voice I auditioned with that Quill liked so much was too close to my vinyl, and yeah, you can hear it. It sounds like Vinyl's doing an upset customer impression. I should have tried lightening the voice or doing something to make it stand out from Vinyl, or suggested that. If you are directing a project like this with one VA doing 2 roles, it's good to check and make sure what voices are being used don't sound too close. And if you're the VA, never be afraid to speak up if you feel there's something wrong. Not that I was afraid to, I just didn't think about it, and I really should have. It's only a small part, so I wouldn't say it's detrimental. The narration also works well since it comes off like a retelling of events. It covers a long period of time within a nearly 17-minute time span while hitting the most important points with dialogue. Another thing I noticed was the lack of showing in Vinyl doing all the things Quill listed. I feel more could have been done to show Vinyl being lazy, while at the same time trying hard to do a good job. This would have helped to give the argument more weight at the end. As it stands now, it does make it a little hard to get behind this being a big deal for Vinyl when we don't see her putting much effort into her job, nor justifying Quill's anger over one mistake. Sure, she told us, but there's a big difference between telling and showing in this instance. It's the difference between someone relaying events and you experiencing them personally. There's also the end where Quill tells the audience what Vinyl said after Quill saved her from being fired, instead of having the actual conversation like in other parts of the story, which was weird since this was the big emotional moment and no other part was like this. Even though it's after the holidays, I'd recommend giving this a watch. It's not often you see holiday stories that look into the lives of retail workers, which is odd since that seems like an interesting angle to take with a holiday story. The story is fun with how well Quill and Vinyl's characters work together, the great voice work, and the overall good writing despite a couple things that could be added to improve it further. Hopefully we'll see more of Quill and Vinyl in the future. Once again, we're taking a look at Fallout Equestria, Lost Audio Files for this month's episodes. As a reminder, I will not talk about things such as voice work or audio quality as there's no need to bring that up again. I will bring up Force's ability to create immersive experiences through the use of sound and audio editing, because Force can't stop delivering in that department. This month's episodes are Pipsqueak, Scrap Sav, and Unknown Builder. Pipsqueak is about a pony wanting to follow in the hoofsteps of Pipsqueak and do good for the Wasteland. Things don't go exactly as planned, as it seems things got messy. It's hard to say what happened as it cuts out before we understand what caused the change, and the audio after the first half is a jumbled mess of recordings. The way Force edited them together tells us a lot of what happened, not just in what we're allowed to hear, but in the fact that it's mixed up to begin with. I'll leave it there because it's best to be experienced rather than told. Scrap Sav is about a pony scavenger who's had enough of working under his boss, shoots them, and walks off with a pip book and I believe any other goods they picked up. There wasn't any mention of other goods found. I like how the story is expressed through the audio, how the hunters looking for the scavenger express what you need to know as to why they're there. The sound of the fighting, and how enough of each scene plays so you get an idea of what's going on and where things are going. It's all just enough while sounding natural and not telling too much. Well done as always. Unknown Builder is the standout and my favorite of the bunch. It's about an old pony who likes to build things. A pony rushes to find help stumbling upon them, and without a second thought, offers their seemingly expert help and then some, being awfully generous and only asking for company. I adore this one so much. Not only is this Unknown Builder well established, told, and presented character-wise, from the voice to the actions taken, but the way the story flows, the moment we experience, it tells us so much with so little. If they had died there, I probably would have gotten emotional, and I only knew a few minutes of who they were, barely anything more. It's their snappiness, how they handle the situation without pause, and how all they want is some company. With how little there was, it's amazing what Force was able to do and convey. I also appreciate a positive story every so often in the dark of the Wasteland. Like last time, I do recommend this series. Fans of MLP not familiar with Fallout may have a hard time understanding certain things, but it's amazing how much it does with so little. I especially recommend Unknown Builder if you had to choose one. Definitely don't start with Pipsqueak. It's kind of experimental in its presentation and may be confusing for the standard listener. Start simple and work from there. It's well worth your time. While we're on the topic of Fallout Equestria, it seems I did miss an audio production from last month. Well, sort of. It's more of a compilation of Fallout Equestria-related holiday song parodies. At the same time, it also weaves, and I quote from who I believe to be the head of this production, who left a comment in response to another explaining this, context and emotions that are part of the overall story, related to Confessions of a Wasteland Pony. This event has also been built up since the Ice Mare, meaning it, in its own way, is part of the story. The last episode ended on a big note, and if it does cover anything important to the story, I do believe it counts and should be covered here, as it is a side project to the main series. Anyways, this one is called The Winter Solstice Ball, created by East Corp Productions. It's pretty straightforward. All the talking bits are by DJ Pone 3, giving narration over the songs he plays for this ball. I believe it's implying he's acting as the DJ during this holiday party, playing songs for the attendees. It's hard to tell how long it's been since the last episode timeline-wise, but it sounds as if the events after have affected him in some way. He's drinking a lot and sounds pretty depressed. There's a lot away from the performance, him mentioning all the friends who couldn't be there. With how quiet the narration scenes are, the reminiscing, drinking, it gives off an overbearing feeling of loneliness, and on the holidays, that's pretty sad. The production here is great. The way sounds are used in the sloshing of the drink and the character drinking it is perfect. You really feel like you're there, listening to these songs, hearing him talk. How DJ Pony 3 talks about the music makes the character feel so real. Even if you didn't know who he was or what happened, you can feel a lot of personality coming out from the dialogue, and to how well the actor brings it all together. This is further emphasized by the music, as how it transitions from song to song gives more weight to them than they otherwise would have. There's not much more I can say, since most of these are song parodies and they sound good. Lots of nice variety, good singers, well written parody-wise. There was one with Raiders and it was pretty silly. Other than that, it was nice. I was more interested in the narrative bits, most likely because it's past the holidays by this point, and I wanted to know more of the story, especially after the ending of that last episode. Perhaps that blood splatter at the end has something to do with it. I can only recommend this to Fallout Equestria fans, but more so Confessions of a Waste Pony fans, since this is more geared to them in a sense. It's got great production, writing, acting, with fun Christmas parody songs weaved in for those interested. If you're more interested in the narrative bits, you can always skip to them, or skip through the talking if you just want the music. You won't miss a thing, so you can choose however you want to listen. If you haven't seen Confessions of a Wasteland Pony and you'd be interested, I give it a high recommendation. It's a great series, but no, it's a long one. Episodes get as long as 4 hours. Regardless, it's well worth your time. If you like it, I'd recommend listening to all the other Fallout Equestria stuff they have on their channel, since it's all interconnected as I'm learning now. As I was saying, all the Fallout Equestria related series on this channel are connected in some way, making references to one another here and there, be it characters or situations. You'll really have to pay attention for some of the smaller details. It's awesome. This is one of them. The 33rd episode and the 34th, or the 30th and 31st if you don't count the April Fool episodes, in Wasteland Survival Guide. For those unfamiliar, it's basically Ditzy reading her book in her head because she's a ghoul and doesn't have a jaw or much of a tongue, so she can't talk. This book was made to help those who are new to the Wasteland or want tips on how to survive in this dangerous land. I had this series set to watch at some point, but seeing as I'd be covering it for this, I gave the whole thing a listen in preparation. The first I'll be covering, Wild Wasteland, goes over the strange things you may see in the wasteland, like a corpse with "Yeah!" written over the face or the strange gang of grannies chasing Derpy with rolling pins, as she mentions. While writing this chapter, she was hiding from them. It's pretty basic, going over what you may see, and Dizzy rambling about her thoughts while in the moment of writing. This has great sound production as can be expected from East Corp Productions. The audio's clear, the music never gets too loud, and it all sounds nice. Needlestitch, the voice actor for Ditsy Do, does a great job giving life and personality through her performance. Of course, the writing has its part in that, but you can tell a lot of its personality came through because of the acting. There is also a bonus blooper video released alongside it, which was as silly as you'd imagine. For those who care, there is some swearing in that. The other episode, Settlement Building, wasn't nearly as fun, but it was informative. It goes over building shelters, things to look out for, basics in construction, things to consider, that sort of thing. It's episodes like these that really make it feel like a survival guide, while others feel more fantastical like Wild Wasteland, or so very specific for a world like Equestria. These have a more grounded feel, as it feels like something you could apply in the real world, which is pretty neat. I'd say I enjoyed Wild Wasteland more because of how kooky the situations were, but this is still a good addition for building the idea of a survival guide. Once again, I can only truly recommend this to Fallout Equestria fans, or those interested in learning more about the world. If you'd like some explanations on certain aspects such as commonly mentioned drugs like Dash, get an idea of the culture what the Wasteland is like, a little history, or other aspects, this series is a good place to look. These episodes in particular are simple and straightforward. I doubt you'll learn anything new from it in the world of Fallout Equestria, but if you're interested in the Fallout Equestria series on this channel, and this in particular, you should or have already listened. Still, it's another nice addition to the guide, and I do recommend the series in general to any who's interested. The first episode of a new audio drama created by Angel of Darkness and Lori Play KD. I almost missed this one, but thankfully, I checked EQD in time to find their trailer in the nightly roundup. They have been working on this project for 2 years. Way to go for getting the first episode out. Though I can't say I enjoyed it much. It's hard to explain. I'm going to start by generalizing my criticism of the overall product thus far. It has a very hard trying to be dark and emotional feel throughout, which, as you could expect, doesn't translate well. Part of the problem comes from the writing, the other acting, and then the editing. It's not that some of these ideas can't work. In fact, there are some ones that do have a hint of hitting where they should. The problem comes down to the rushed nature of the writing and lack of character. The only way I can describe characters like Sombra's father is guy gets corrupted by darkness and turns into edgy Dark Lord, mother, innocent wife of Dark Lord, who must save her children, Sombra, unfortunate victim who turns into edgy Dark Lord, with love interest who has hints of being the same boat as him. Basically, there's nothing to them. Their purpose is to move the story along at this point, making them feel less like characters and more like tools serving a purpose. It doesn't help that with the edgy tone it's giving off that these characters come off as cliché and flat, making it hard to take seriously. The story itself is seriously rushed while not taking the proper time to focus where it should. With the time it took to establish Sombra's parents, it could have cut right to his father getting corrupted and moving right to Sombra being sent to Cantaloupe, all while weaving Sombra's care for his family. So we would have a bit of that punch later. That would give more to focus on Sombra, his relationships with the characters Starswirl, Luna, and Celestia, while also developing the other characters and their relationships. His parents and family are mostly irrelevant to the story, thus giving them any time is worthless and bogs down the story. I'm surprised to see no resolution with Starswirl if he was even around. With how he completely fell from the story, his inclusion felt pointless and lacked much reason to be there. Aside from that, every moment that happens feels like a bullet point, not helped by the narration throughout interrupting the story to keep things moving, as if this is nothing more than a way to explain future events. I don't know what the next episodes hold, but I have a feeling this kind of backstory could have easily been interspersed throughout the actual story. You didn't need to make a whole episode covering all of this when it could have been touched later on, when it'd be more relevant, and would give the audience more reason to be intrigued, as there's a mystery, questions, bits of information you could tease them with. The worst of this rushing and the ultimate consequence of it comes right at the end, where Sombra is taken over and takes down Princess Celestia and Luna. What went wrong here is that Sombra had no real relationship with Celestia, as far as the audience was shown, thus her comments are hollow at best. With Luna, since we barely know much about her other than some vague references to her relationship with Sombra and a hint about her feelings before Sombra showed up, everything being communicated falls flat on an emotional level. Had the story taken time to build these relationships rather than tell us at the end and expect us to understand, this wouldn't feel so lost. There needed to be more exposition on why Luna is suddenly turning into Nightmare Moon in that instance. You can't expect the audience to have seen the source material you're referencing and understand what's going on from that. After which, important character moments are told to us. Nightmare Moon and Sombra are talking to each other every night, making it lose any weight as the audience is not experiencing it. They're being told. If the story wasn't focused on getting to a point as much as it is, aspects of this could easily work. There are some concepts that interest me despite how cliché they are. This idea of a world or worlds beyond Equestria fighting, and how one side accepted this union of opposites, while the other couldn't, and how each side handled the situation. It's interesting, but not much is done with it, nor is much hinted to it having much importance other than a means to set up the story. There was also Luna and Celestia's parents being life and death, which is an interesting idea seeing as Luna and Celestia control the sun and moon. It makes sense their parents would have a similar dichotomy. I felt like the scene where Sombra is being taken over by darkness could have had more emotion had it not had Skillets Falling in the Black playing in the background. I understand what you're trying to do. Falling in the black, falling into darkness, the lyrics corresponding with the situation. The problem with using songs like that is when combined with these sorts of setups, makes it come off as unintentionally funny. Skeleton bands like it, such as Linkin Park, are known for being mean for being dark, edgy, emo. So when you set it to a story that's trying too hard, you get a perfect storm of unintended humor. I will say, what makes this better than most who do it, is you use the piano cover, not the actual song. That and following the scene with a quote from Anastasia, "Come my minions, rise for your master," it makes the scene near impossible to take seriously, at least for me. When I focused on the visuals, it did pretty okay, and I felt a slight tug as I had been following the journey, and seeing him lose himself and those he loves is sad. Had the story been better told or executed, I could have felt more in this moment rather than going over how he's such an edgy emo boy. Everything moves too fast, things are conveniently placed or happen without much reason. It's problematic. The only thing that kind of worked was a relationship between Sombra and Luna, which was pretty cute despite being rushed. They had some nice moments, and I liked how it established that Luna only had Sombra in some way, with Starswirl and Celestia being too busy for her. There was also the scene with Luna and, I'm going to refer to her as her Aunt Foss because obvious reasons, where she told her how the falling stars were her father's tears, which was cute. I generally say the dialogue was a big contributor to the weak story, as it often sounded strange. It didn't come off natural nor sound like something people would say. This was especially a problem at the end, when it came off kinda silly how casually they were talking during the battle. As I recommended with Mother Chrysalis, reading the dialogue out loud helps during editing passes. I'd also recommend watching some live-action movies. Study how people talk to each other, how people converse, what they say, why. It will help you in writing dialogue in the future. Then there's the voice work, audio, and general editing. It was smart for Angel and Lori to get other voice actors, not that they were all great, but had it just been them, this would have been a lot worse. The voice acting is pretty weak overall in the actors' abilities to be expressive, clear, or emotional. Of them all, I'd say Skylight Arts, the voice of Celestia, and a random crystal pony did the best work. The mic was the cleanest, acting the best of them all. When you're editing the audio, you should try to clean the static. Have your voice actors record at least 3 seconds of silence. If you're using Audacity, select that silence, go under Effects, and you should see Noise Reduction. Get a noise profile of that selected section, highlight their audio, then noise reduce till the static's gone. Don't do it too much or it'll ruin the audio. If you aren't, check if your program has this function. If not, get Audacity and clean the audio. That static is distracting with how loud it is and how often it cuts in and out with the audio. You should also have some silence recorded to play behind all the audio to ensure that the audio flows without little, what I'd call, kick in the audio when it switches between audio clips. It covers that gap without audio. Make sure it's not staticky either, otherwise it'll make your audio worse. And make sure to focus on balancing the audio. During the romance scene, that music was getting pretty loud and nearly taking over, making it hard to hear the voice actors. There was also the use of sound and music. I already covered the use of Falling in the Black being a bad choice, but music only cuts in during a romantic scene with Luna and Sombra, the scene with him being taken over, and finally at the credits. It's strange hearing silence and suddenly music. You need to decide if music will be used or not, otherwise it becomes jarring. It's not that you can't have some scenes without music, it's more that it feels empty without music and jarring when it does cut in. If you are going to use sounds, you should use them more than you did. I'd recommend it as it does help to tell the story and build atmosphere. As it's being used now, it's strange when it does, as it feels like it's coming in whenever it feels like it, rather than when it's needed. I don't know if you put those fighting sounds together or pulled them from somewhere, but either way, that scene sounded the best audio-wise, though the sounds were a bit loud in comparison to the voice actors. I can't exactly recommend this as it is now. So far, it's pretty underwhelming. Not the worst thing, not at all, but it's got a ways to go. I'd say if you do watch this, don't physically watch it, listen to it. It's not that the art is bad, but all that camera movement was hurting my eyes. Everyone's different. My eyes are pretty sensitive to stuff like that, so if you can make it through the first few minutes, you should be fine. This could still work. It has an interesting foundation, so I'd say wait an episode and see where it goes. I did have a script for this section. I wrote and rewrote it because I had no idea how to go about this. I could go on about the unnecessary divorce plot that halts the story, takes away from the most important event in Flurry's life, what should have been one of the most important character moments losing all impact with the lack of build-up, and takes away focus from the main characters in exchange for characters who most likely won't appear for another 2 episodes, at least Twilight according to the Twilight VA. I could go on about how Flurry and Sugar still have no real character, something that could easily be said about everyone so far. Flurry in particular only definable through every princess trope, stereotype, and cliche. I could go on about the poorly handled time skip, the slapped-in villain song number, or how everything in this episode, combined with the new knowledge I received that the scenes in the first didn't intend to imply Sugar's parents are abusive, despite their very clear actions, but in truth they're actually supportive of her, making episode 1 almost entirely pointless to watch. But I don't want to. In some way, I feel like I'm repeating myself since in the last roundup, I think I did a good enough job delivering the criticism needed. So instead of giving out the same "this isn't working" points, I like to take this time to talk about the people who make audio dramas possible. The true heroes of any production, the cast. Though I could give them criticism, I decided to focus on talking about what I like, even love of this cast, and what they do. Let's start with the voice cast. I know she's not an important character, but Peacock Studios, who does Gemma's mom, has the perfect voice for the role. It's so cute, and I'd love to hear it more. Listening Moon Song 7 does well as the villain Ivy, with her low, smooth voice, and how they express the lines. Then there's Night of Breath, who does Ivy's singing voice, and you wouldn't know because they do that good of a job, doing well with the rap and everything. There's this crystal point that serves Flurry, done by Starlair, who I'll touch on more later as they're also an artist for the series. I love the voice and tone given. It adds what is trying to be expressed. The way they drone on, repeating the same compliments, the the feeling of hollowness that comes with them, further expressed by Flurry. Speaking of Flurry, Heartsy does well in her role. Her lashing out scene was my favorite part. I can't say too much for Sugar Cloud, who voices the titular character, because she doesn't appear much in this, but she does well in expressing her discomfort over Flurry's coronation in particular. That sense of awkwardness really comes through. I also can't say too much for Flutterose, who does Cadence, or Sour Patch King, who does Shining, because they didn't have much of a role in this episode, but they sound good as their characters. Finally, there's Candy Drop, who voices Lightning Sparkle, and Holly J. Frosting, who voices Twilight, and both do well. Candy Drop sounds like a child, so I say that's a big plus, and Holly J. Frosting sounds pretty close to Twilight. On to the artists, and boy do I have a lot to say about them. They do such an amazing job, so much so, I find this way more fun and enjoyable to watch with the sound turned off. Not that the voice actors were awful or anything, I don't mean to belittle the work they do, because there are things I loved hearing them express, like Peacock as Gemma's mom, or the scenes with Flurry and the crystal pony serving her. What I mean is the images do a far better job conveying the story and characters than the writing. Starting with the standard scenes in order. Shooting Star the Pony's familiar style appears in the first scene. You've most likely seen her work if you keep up with a lot of dramas. As always, she does a great job with the scene given. One of my favorite details is when the characters are in the light, their lines are colored. When they're in the shadows, the lines are black. You can especially see this when Sugar sticks her wings out so part of it is touching the light and her body is in the dark. There's also the stretchy expressiveness of Ivy selling the villain's appearance. My favorite shot was this downward angle looking at Sugar from behind a crystal. That was pretty neat, and the flat angle of the crystal draws our eyes right to Sugar. Another artist seen doing work with lots of MLP audio dramas, Era Emma. Her style is so pretty. The texture is a lovely sight that gives her images a special sheen. I love how she fills the space and knows how to pose the characters so that our eyes are going to the right places. I also noticed this texture look to the yellow on the line of Sugar's hair, an interesting touch. The brightest Twilight is next. Not much is done in the scene other than a standard shot of Twilight and Lightning sitting on a train, but I did love the shot of them leaving. That was well drawn. Mystic Insanity is the next artist. I love the details on the mane, specifically Cadence with her tied up hair. There's some really nice detail work that gives the characters that extra softness. I also love the style. It looks so unique. Sugar Cloud has the scene right after. Not much is done here other than moving the eyes, but the art style is cute. This next one is done by MuseScript, who is most known for doing voice work in audio productions than art, so this is an interesting change of pace. The art style is also cute, and there's a lot more movement here that gives more visual intrigue than the last scene. In fact, the way these scenes flow art-wise works well, because the art styles follow a similar, simple, rounded look. I'm going to skip over the animatic for now to talk about Dashing Nightingale. I love the hair texture, mostly in the close-up and on Twilight, Shining, and Cadence. It looks really nice. Next is Marzipan Studios, who included that crystal pony caring for Flurry before in the piece. It makes me wonder if she has an important role in the family, perhaps as a caretaker to the children, or a general servant or assistant. There aren't too many pictures here, but I like the crowd shot. All the ponies' faces are adorable. After this is Nixture Phoenix is seen, who also has a lovely style. I noticed that in both scenes where Flurry and this crystal pony interact, she's brushing her mane. I'm not sure if the artists coordinated this or if they were told to have both scenes like this, but it almost suggests how Flurry's this perfect, pristine doll that serves as a face, someone who must be prettied up and told how important she is. Her ragged mane here is also interesting, since the last scene was the coronation, and I doubt she messed with her mane that much. That's all the artists for scenes, but not all the artists in this project, because I've saved the biggest for last. There are two animatics I want to talk about. The first being by Heartsy Artsy. I like the use of magic powder by the villain, and how it was conveyed artistically. It gives a better idea of who she is and what she's capable of, that she's more than a normal earth pony. There's also a lot of shots that help tell the story, and how Ivy feels about these characters. I enjoyed this fun downward angle that pulls back and shows Ivy standing under the swirl of sparkling magic. That looks so cool! Heartsea drew some really nice poses in this for Ivy, which helps in pushing what's being conveyed with the music. I also liked how she put some animation during an important part of the song for emphasis. That was a nice touch. And finally, there's Starlayer's animatic ending the episode. This was my favorite part of the art I've seen from this series. Seriously, the visual storytelling here does far more for the characters and story than the entirety of the series. It's amazing. Let's break it down, starting with Flurry's mane falling down as she removes the crown, symbolizing her taking off her princessy persona to be more of herself. She looks to the twirling heart within as it shatters, representing her torn psyche that she may crack under all this pressure. Flurry then sweeps around, making a great transition into Cadance and these ponies telling her she's great. First is her mother, who's prepping her for royalty, showing signs of motherly care in her touch as Flurry looks up to her, but also juxtaposes this with the ponies who bow to her. From her mother standing above looking down lovingly, to Flurry looking down at the ponies who look up to her. Next is a scene that leaves a lot of questions. The way Flurry shuts things out like play, fun, and happiness in order to study. The image shows Sugar and Gemma playing in comparison to Flurry, being so tired, suggesting how this is draining on her, while she wants to join in on the fun her sister has, the freedom of not being the crown princess, at least in this case. I have seen other stories of princesses, even in more serious and grounded stories, where princesses are shown with friends and enjoying things most normal people do in noble life, even participating in politics in normal ways, taking action, and so on. In short, they do way more than study and participate in parties or events. It makes me wonder if Flurry is doing this to herself or pressured to live this way. If so, it would add a lot to her character. There's also a great use of the rule of thirds, with Flurry's head touching one intersection and Gemma and Sugar in another, and the curtain pulls over them in a way that draws our eyes from Flurry to them. She's blocking out her loved ones in her self-made isolation because she believes she has to do this alone, a space where there could be no temptation. There's also a nice balance between Flurry being big and Gemma and Sugar being small. I should explain the rule of thirds real fast. When doing composition, there's this technique where you divide your image into thirds, and you want the focal points of your shot to land on those intersections. I'll leave a link to the site that goes over this with examples for anyone wanting to learn more. We cut back to Flurry, whose body posture shows how the weight of being this perfect figure weighs on her, and even symbolizes how alicorns are portrayed as these godly figures who can do no wrong by using her magic to make her mane flow out like theirs. But at the end of the day, she isn't like them, as her hair falls back down, still as ever. It's also further pushed by showing Cadance and Twilight, alicorns with still manes. They're flowing as they're posed like the beautiful figures they are. The animation of the manes works well with how it juts out and eases back in, helping to give that blowing in the wind feel. In the background shot where it's just Flurry hunched over, we see it slanted slightly, visually giving a sense of unease. Adding to the unease Flurry feels about her situation, it returns to normal when she talks about being perfect, as if trying to write herself back to that perfect princess she must be. When Flurry talks about being a teen after that scene, we see her walking and talking with all these supposed friends, but the moment the crown goes on, she's alone. We then get another nice transition showing these same ponies once following her and talking at her level, bowing down to her. Cadance giving an approving nod, despite Flurry's uncomfortable face at the situation. She goes on to imagine a normal life, where she sleeps around or eats cookies, things someone with a princessy image wouldn't be caught doing. We then get a quick set of shots going over how she feels she can't do this, and crying as everything begins to truly weigh on her. What's interesting is this cut right here as she bends her head down when crying. It cuts to black for a split second. This makes for a better transition than cutting right to the next shot, as the mood change is sudden, and this allows for a soft buffer, possibly even visually expressing how princesses shouldn't be seen crying. So the black and cut to something more princessy, at least in Flurry's mind, is like pulling a curtain over her to hide this. The shot pulling back to show this big, empty, lonely room as we see her grow as the sun sets and the moon rises, cutting her sitting on the throne guarded by 2 ponies. After this is a series of shots going over what she had to learn in order to become the crown princess, ending with this great sequence where we see her standing with ponies, sipping a fancy bubbly drink, and the ponies she speaks with flash in and out, the number growing from 1 to 2 to 4, faces and details fading out until there are ponies with crossed out faces and no details, just a standard color. All the while, Flurry's expression turns to disinterest as she drowns herself in the drink. We see more of what she has to do, levitating this clutter of maps, books, her delegating as she sits between these 2 ponies arguing, handling it with maturity. Then there's Flurry transitioning over to the balcony, where she looks out to the free, open night sky, calling for freedom, but turns away back to her room, stopping to face who I believe is a manifestation of Cadence stopping her, as Flurry turns back to see a manifestation of herself flying out into that sky, free, as the real Flurry reaches out to her, but then is pulled back in by a series of hoops I'm assuming are Cadence's, Sugar's, and Shining's. This leads to the most interesting and telling thing, her facing the consequences of freedom, of giving up the crown, burdening her sister who stands there, holding the crown, in tears, their parents by her side almost looking down at Flurry, which suggests her disapproval of the idea of her being free, or what Flurry believes they'd feel. So Flurry swats it away, as she yells her frustrations at the crystal heart itself, her burden, as we transition to 2 normal team ponies walking by. But as they pass, Flurry looks up to see a crowd of ponies in front of her, bowing before someone. She runs past them and sees her sister wearing the crown, the burden, as she cries. This is a vision of that future, where Flurry isn't the crown princess, a reminder that there is no true freedom, either be burdened by the crown or burden another. It cuts away as we're brought back to Flurry in her room, looking around as she realizes she's still there, in her room, now in front of her mirror. We get an image of Flurry looking up at a framed picture of her and her sister, moving down so we face Flurry in the mirror, looking at her crown. She puts her hair up as before when she wore the crown, which she puts back on. As she does, the mirror cracks over her face, showing her crack in the facade she puts on, that it's slowly starting to shatter, the mirror a reflection of her true self. Finally, the moment fades to black. What a trip that was! If you want to get into animatic making while looking at MLP audio dramas and how they do it, this is a great place to start. Starlair clearly has a great grasp on visual storytelling, and I look forward to the next animatic they make. There is a lot of talent in this production, and they deserve so much love. In fact, there's a lot of talent in all these audio dramas and productions, so I'm going to leave a Google Doc in the description with all their links, their social medias I can find, and any commissions they have open. Let me know if I missed anything and I'll update. I couldn't find anything for A Glistening Moon 7, so if anyone knows anything I can link here, please let me know. We give a lot of love to creators, but I don't know how often we show that love to those who make these things happen, so why not change that? That covers all the audio dramas for this month. Let's take a look at the updates, trailers, sneak peeks, and casting calls of last month. Twilight Sparkle Shows released a trailer for episode 6 of Without Your Princess. From what I understand, the main 6 are in trouble, so the next episode may be hinting at some danger on the horizon. Go check it out, links in the description. On this channel, we released the trailer for a month-long release of a series called Tales of Love, where I tell stories featuring MLP ships and even loving relationships. Unfortunately, it's gone on hiatus until further notice. Life got busy and I have some things to focus on, but it will continue to release soon. I missed this trailer last month, so I'm making up for it by putting it here. Queen Callista has released a trailer for episode 3 of The Destiny's Calling. It looks like it'll be the darkest of the episodes thus far, especially with a title like The Dark Alicorn. The episode's already out, so you may as well go check it out. I'll talk about the episode itself next month. Yet another sneak peek I missed. Bridal Way Studios brings a sneak peek of a future holiday special for Children of Harmony. It's sounding great so far, and will be an interesting story, filled with holiday spirit and some drama, giving a little insight into the characters. Go check it out and keep checking back for its release. Candy Cruise released a sneak peek of episode 2 of their audio drama, Rise of the Sisters. I can't tell if these ponies are Twilight's children or her sisters. I'm going to guess children, but as of now, there isn't much to discern other than Candy feeling jealous of her sister's abilities. There's a lot of different editing transitions, something I haven't seen an audio drama do, so if you want to see, go check it out. Heartsy Artsy and Peacock Studios have released an animatic sneak peek for episode 4 of Shadows of Corruption on Peacock's channel. It's already looking like a doozy of an episode from this sneak peek, showcasing a song parody to be featured in the episode. Not to mention so many drawings and animation! Has MLP audio drama animatic gone too far, to the point they're becoming full-out animations? Guess you'll have to check the link to find out. Feather Flash has released a sneak peek for their future audio drama, The Lunar Diaries. I don't feel this is the most accurate representation of what it's about according to the story description, and some things are hard to hear, but it is a look at what's to come, and there are multiple hoof cloths for multiple ponies moving! You have no idea how many people forget to do that. There's also a casting call for the series still going as far as I'm aware. The characters in need of voices are Princess Luna, Princess Celestia, and an OC, Shadow Rose. All of them are main characters and will need singing voices. Flash didn't specify if you could audition for singing or voice acting separately. You will need to ask. There are also understudy roles available for the other characters in the series. The document has that laid out going over who is available and who's not. Go check it out if this sounds interesting to you. Team Mare Productions has released a casting call for a series of audio drama shorts. Though it's said to have ended either January 29th or February 1st, I have a feeling this will be extended. Characters such as Princess Celestia and Luna, the Student 6, Lyra, Bonbon, Octavia, and background ponies will be needed. Why not check it out? Rose Lips has put up a casting call for a new audio drama called Prick from a Thorn. There are only 2 characters that need voices, those being the villain of the story, Thorn, and Derpy, who has a small part in the first episode, and there is a need for artists. It looks like it'll be an interesting project, so if you're interested, why not check it out? Yay Fluttershy has released a casting call concerning a character whose VA has seemingly gone inactive. The character voice needed is an OC by the name of Amari, a minor character in the story. By the time this comes out, it will most likely be over, but this did come out in February, so it should still be covered. Instead of checking it out, why not go over to the channel and give some warm support? MuseScript has released a comic dub for comic based on her audio drama series, The Color Goddess. It was fun to follow the comic as it came out, and it's awesome to see there's a comic adaptation with the cast of The Color Goddess, which in this case is mostly used in Peacock Studios. If you love The Color Goddess, you should absolutely check this out. Queen Callista has released a new intro for her series, Destiny's Calling. It looks pretty cute, featuring some original art. Of course, the episode is already out, but did come out in February, so I'm still going to cover it. I have some updates on casting calls mentioned from last month. Midnight was finally able to get that Rainbow Dash VA, so that is closed, hopefully for good. Screwy X Moth has cancelled their audio drama I was going to cover this month, but Screwy has decided now's not the time. I'll leave the video talking about this below. Go give your support there. There's nothing wrong with cancelling if you're not feeling up to taking the task, and there'll always be a next time. And Blue Heart Tattoo recently had a voice actor drop. This voice actor was the VA for Chrysalis, Princess Luna, and Rarity. Thankfully, all the roles are finally filled, but the project looks like it's in need of at least one more artist. So, if you're interested, go check it out. I'll leave the video and Casting Call Club links below. And that's all the audio drama goings on for this past month. Be sure to check everything out. All links are in the description. If there's something I missed, be it a casting call, drama, what have you, and you would like me to talk about it, send it through the comments or through a note on DeviantArt. I have all the stipulations and such linked in the Google Doc below, if you're not sure if yours does or does not count. Otherwise, I'll let you know. I'd like to end today's roundup with a big thank you for all the support I got for the first roundup. I didn't expect the series to get so much love, likes, and all that, so thank you so much. It means a lot. These roundups take so much time to research with YouTube's awful algorithm, not to mention writing, recording, and editing it all together in a reasonable amount of time while making sure I'm giving the correct information, so that reception gave me a lot of motivation to keep going. I'm glad to hear a fair amount of people have been checking out the stuff I mentioned, so please keep doing that. Keep giving these projects support regardless of how much I did or didn't like it, or if it didn't exactly catch your eye. You'd be surprised. There's so much out there, and some of it doesn't nearly get the amount of love they deserve. I hope to keep the series going for as long as the community is active, which looks like it'll be for a very long time. See you next month!